As you prepare for the 2021 fantasy football season, a great question to ask is, who are the top running backs going to be? Well, we're not going to waste any time. Chris and I are going to count down the top 10 running backs heading into 2021 season to let you know who you should be targeting in your early draft. Keep in mind, we're talking about this before the NFL draft. There are going to be some rookies who go to favorable landing spots that could alter this. So check back in again after the draft for our revised top 10 ranking. All right, let's get into it. Chris, let's start off at number 10. Who is first on the list?
Coming in at number 10, we've got Austin Ekeler of the Chargers. He finished the season 5th in expected fantasy points in PPR leagues. And we know the big thing for him is he's more of a pass catcher than a running back, and that's huge in today's game. One thing that Justin Herbert did was he would check the ball down to running backs. Even when Kalen Ballage was playing because all the other running backs are hurt, he was still catching like 5 or 6 passes every single game. So Austin Ekeler, we know he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game. He's going to get work in between the tackles as well. The only thing that keeps him this low, in my opinion, is his lack of red zone usage, his lack of usage around the goal line. He's not going to score a ton of touchdowns. He's not that type of running back, but with the pass game or with the receptions, he has a nice safe floor.
Yeah, and with all the volatility, all the injuries, all the craziness at running back, it's nice to just have a guy that has that high floor. Only thing is, I just don't know if he'll ever be a bell cow type back. Now, at number 9, this will be a guy that, this may be a little controversial. Cam Akers of the Rams. I know the first half he was basically a bust for fantasy purposes. Didn't do much. Had that rib injury. When things really mattered towards the late part of the season, Akers did become the guy. Almost became a league winner for fantasy purposes. Look, week 12, 84 yards and a touchdown. The next week, 94 total yards and a touchdown. And then that monster game, 171 yards against the Patriots. Can only imagine what he might have done with a full complement of touches. But then in the playoffs, right, when it mattered the most, getting some pretty good defenses, 131 yards and a touchdown, along with 45 receiving yards, and then 90 yards and a touchdown. He's proven that he can be the guy. Darrell Henderson is kind of an afterthought at this point. So Cam Akers, I can only imagine what the ceiling would be for him over a full season. Next year, I'm really excited to get as many Akers shares as possible.
Yeah, this is your guy. You talked him up all year, and finally towards the end of the season, we saw what he can do. And you got to think rolling into 2021, the Rams are going to be ready to have him as their main guy. And then at number 8, Nick Chubb. I mean, there's not a lot to say here about Nick Chubb. The guy's one of the best pure running backs in the NFL. Cleveland, a team that wants to run the ball, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, great defense. I mean, this is basically where you want a running back to be when you're drafting a running back for fantasy purposes, right? This is an offense geared around the running backs. Only thing that keeps Nick Chubb this low is Kareem Hunt, because for as good as Nick Chubb is, and he's very good, Kareem Hunt being there does limit his upside to some degree. He doesn't have those massive 30, 40-point games that we see from the guys we're going to talk about in the top 5, but even still, Nick Chubb is too good. He's got to be the number 8 running back.
Yeah, absolutely. The closest thing you can get to a workhorse this far down in the rankings. The only thing, like you said, is that, he doesn't have that high of a floor based on the fact that he isn't the only pass catching back. Kareem Hunt probably still going to be around there to vulture some touchdowns. You got to be encouraged, though, by the step forward that Baker Mayfield and that whole Browns offense took this year. All right, coming in at number 7, a guy that considered as high as a top 3 pick overall this past year, but we've got to drop Ezekiel Elliott down. I understand the fact that this offense was totally different without Dak Prescott. Before he was hurt, those first 5 weeks, Zeke was averaging 107 total yards per game and more than a touchdown per game. That's what we expect, and we could see that again next year. But again, we have to be sure. We don't know. We can assume Dak will be 100%. And Tony Pollard did work his way into the mix. Zeke, definitely somebody you can rely on as an RB1. I just don't think we can put him in the top 5 anymore because some other guys maybe have passed him by.
Yeah, Zeke is going to be a tough one to rank. Like you said, with Dak Prescott, he was really good. But as the season went on, we saw more of Tony Pollard. We saw less of Ezekiel Elliott. We saw less production from Ezekiel Elliott even when he was on the field. So he's going to be a really tough guy to rank. And you know who else is going to be tough to rank? That's Alvin Kamara, who we have at number 6. Not because Alvin Kamara isn't good or great or elite. It's because Drew Brees is going to retire. According to Jay Glazer, he's reporting that Drew Brees will retire. So that means we're going to get a year of Alvin Kamara with Taysom Hill. Now, we saw a 4-game stretch of Alvin Kamara with Taysom Hill, and it was not pretty. He only averaged 14 fantasy points per game. He only had one game where he got more than, I think, 2 receptions in the game. So what are we really going to get from Alvin Kamara next year? It's probably not going to be the Drew Brees Alvin Kamara who averaged over 8 targets per game. And we know Taysom Hill is going to vulture touchdowns near the goal line. I mean, he did that when Alvin Kamara tied the record with 6 touchdowns. Taysom Hill still found a way to vulture a touchdown from Alvin Kamara. So you got to drop him. But again, can't drop him too low because he's still a great player. And you got to think he's still going to be the focal point of this offense. So number 6 feels about right for Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a lot of comments here. I mean, we're not even talking overall. We're talking just running backs, not even in the top 5. This is a guy that we both pretty much agreed was the fantasy MVP for 2020. Again, you have to look forward. You can't just look at, what just happened and look at the past. You have to think, what's his value going to be? And it's fair to ask, is Taysom Hill even going to be the quarterback all season? Is it going to be Jameis Winston? I don't think that you can put Kamara as the number 1, 2, or 3 guy. I think that's reasonable to say. Now, before we get to the top 5 running backs heading into 2021, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you see, and leave us a comment. Tell us, what do you think about our rankings? All right, so let's get into the number 5 running back. Finally, it took a little while, but Jonathan Taylor delivered on his promise behind a great offensive line of the Colts. Look, this is a guy that high expectations were set from the beginning, disappointed all throughout the first half. I mean, there were fantasy managers who were trading him, not quite dropping him, but benching him, and this offensive line should still be good. The question is, who's going to be quarterback next year? As much as we'd love to thrust him near the top of the rankings, there's still a little bit of uncertainty here what this offense will look like, but you've got to have high hopes for Taylor. I think I feel pretty good putting him ahead of guys like Kamara.
Yeah, you got to feel good. But like you said, there is some uncertainty. Obviously, the quarterback situation. Also, what are they going to do with Marlon Mack and Jordan Wilkins? Now, I did hear a report that they probably aren't going to re-sign Marlon Mack, but you never know. Is it going to be him and Nyheim Hines? Because if so, then for sure he's a no doubt top 5. For our number 4 running back, I know we're going to get some comments on this one. There's going to be a lot of people who say we're too low on him, but it's Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, he's the true definition of a workhorse running back. Over 300 carries each of the last 2 years. He's led the league in rushing each of the last 2 years. And oh, by the way, he just went for over 2,000 yards last season. But here's the thing. Here's why Derrick Henry is number 4 and not inside the top 3. Even with a 2,000-yard season, he still finished behind Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook in terms of PPR scoring for running backs because he doesn't catch any passes. That's the thing here. So, okay, I said it last year when I told people not to draft him. I said, unless you think he's going to rush for over 1,600 yards again and score a zillion touchdowns again, he's not going to pay off value. Well, he did, and he rushed for over 2,000. But I will sit here right now and guarantee you he's not running for over 2,000 yards again. So even if he goes down to 1,600 yards again or 1,500 yards again, which is a lot of yards for a running back, he's not going to be a top 2 or 3 running back simply because he doesn't catch even more than 20 passes in a season. So the lack of passing game work, in my opinion, keeps him just out of the top 3.
And look, just because he defied the odds and did what he did this year, and there's no denying he's, possibly the toughest running back to bring down in the entire league. There's some magic numbers at play here. So first of all, 300 carries, which he actually carried the ball more this year than he did last year. And we thought, well, there's always been that historical trend when a running back carries the ball more than 300 times, then they start to break down quicker. And the next season, sometimes they see a big drop off. Okay, well, he didn't do that, but back-to-back seasons, but also that 2,000 yard mark, when a running back goes for 2,000 yards, which it's only been done a few times, there's usually a significant drop off the next season because it's not really possible to withstand regression. It happens. So, 1,500 yards, yeah, I'll take that. But also the touchdowns, being a guy that doesn't have really that high floor, but he gets shut down, which is very rare. But when he does get shut down, he gets shut down. Look, that's nitpicking, but still, some of the guys we're going to talk about here, a little bit safer, believe it or not. And number 3, I know you're going to think, well, Saquon Barkley just missed the entire season. That's not safe. He should be fine. He was out since week 1. How many running backs have come back from ACL injuries? It's not going to be an issue going forward. But the good news is when Barkley's on the field, he will be the guy. He's going to get a ton of touches and he's involved as a pass catcher. I have no problem putting him almost back to his previous standard. Some people are taking him number 1 overall last year. I don't quite have him that high, and somebody passed him by for number 2 this year, but I feel like number 3 is not crazy to put Barkley.
No, not at all. And when we talk about his ACL injury, he suffered that injury in week 2. So he's going to have plenty of time to recover and be ready. I'm sure he'll be ready 100%. And once people see him out there and see him running again, all those fears about the knee injury will go away and he'll be a top 3 running back. And this guy, in my opinion, can't be any argument about number 2. Maybe you could argue him number 1 if you want, but no argument that he should be in the top 2. And that's Dalvin Cook, another guy who's an absolute workhorse, passing game, running the ball, gets the goal line carries, and he's on a team that wants to run the ball, right? Minnesota, one of the most run heavy teams. They have a good offensive line. He's a great running back. It's a perfect storm here. I don't see any way you can rank Dalvin Cook any lower than number 2. Dalvin Cook, easy top 2 running back in 2021.
Yeah, and it's funny because he wasn't a top 2 or 3 in some drafts, not even a top 5 running back this year. And a lot of people wish they would have taken Dalvin Cook higher. All the questions that you might have had about him were answered. There was some talk about the contract issue. Maybe he's unhappy. Maybe he's going to hold out. Not an issue. Injuries, right? These guys gotten banged up in the past. Not an issue, right? Is Minnesota maybe going to try to throw it more? No, not an issue. It was all Dalvin Cook. And that's going to continue to be the case going forward. They're going to be a run first team. They're going to fix up that defense. It might even help him, if anything. So Dalvin Cook, forget it. He is number 2 at the very least. But number 1, there's no way we can't have Christian McCaffrey number 1. Understand he missed most of the season, and there's going to be some trepidation taking him again, especially if you took him number 1 this past year. You think, well, I'm not going to get burned twice, right? Look, you're making a mistake if you pass over McCaffrey. As good as those other players we've talked about are, Christian McCaffrey is going to be the number 1 back. When he's on the field, he is absolute workhorse as a runner and a receiver. This offense will be centered around him. I think that the injury thing is maybe going to be a little bit overblown because, Chris, you know this, we've talked about this all throughout the season in our start-sit videos. They weren't going to bring him back because, first of all, they weren't a playoff team. And second of all, the Panthers are very cautious with their players. No reason to rush them back. And they just had a big investment in McCaffrey. I don't think there's anything health-wise really to worry about with McCaffrey. He should be a pretty safe number 1 pick.
Completely agree. And these injuries were those freak, they kind of happen injuries, right? High ankle sprain, the shoulder, landed on the shoulder. These weren't injuries like soft tissue injuries like we see with guys like Will Fuller. And this is a guy who's never missed a game in his career prior to this year, averaged 30 points per game in the 3 games he played. He offers the highest floor and the highest ceiling. He has to be number 1.
Definitely number 1. Well, what do you think? As you're going to pull the trigger with McCaffrey again, if you got the number 1 pick, what do you think about our top 10 list? Let us know. Hit us up with a comment. Of course, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate this. And hit that subscribe button. We definitely appreciate that. All right. Thanks for watching. Good luck in 2021.